Order. The member's time has expired. The Honourable Leanne Dalziel.
I have participated in more than one debate in this Parliament in my time here. The first time that I participated in a debate on a subject that really has been a platform for where we are now, were the 1993 amendments to the Human Rights Act, which took effect on the 1st of February 1994. And I haven't been here as long as Trevor Mallard has, but I remember this debate very, very well. And the second one was the civil union legislation. And I do want to speak briefly to both of those because they are relevant to why we're here tonight. I remember participating in the human rights debate as if it were yesterday. And in fact, the number of submissions that came into that select committee, which I had the honour of serving on, the number of submissions that came in, most of them didn't actually deal at all with all of the amendments to the human rights legislation. They focused on the supplementary order paper, very bravely progressed by Catherine O'Regan, who was an associate minister in the government at the time, and she made sure that sexual orientation and also diseases capable of causing infection, I can't remember what it was, but it was the HIV status clause, and enable people to have a say about whether that should become part of our human rights architecture. And fortunately, that was passed by this House. And at the same time, that legislation changed our Bill of Rights Act, and that was substantial, a substantial advance in this country, and I was very proud to be part of that debate. And actually, I remember standing in this House, and I was sitting up the front and standing up the front, speaking in the third reading of the debate, and it was about 9 o'clock in the morning because we were speaking under urgency. And I remember standing here, and I was so tired because we'd been up till midnight the night before, and I just said, today I just feel so proud to be a Member of Parliament. And I really, really felt that way. And if you remember the early 1990s, there wasn't a lot of things that I felt particularly proud of back then. So it really was a major achievement. But what I remember about that night, after the debate was over, I was invited to appear on television to stand up for what I had voted for, and I appeared debating the issue on the other side with a gentleman called Graham Cappell from one of the religious political parties. And I just want everyone in this House to think for 1 minute where he is today. So, and as I said, I felt very proud of that moment, supporting that legislation, and it was a major, major change. I should have been the minister that introduced the civil union legislation. I really am very sad that I was not. Tragically, I decided to take time out for bad behaviour at the time, and as a result, my colleague, the Honourable David Benson-Pope, had the honour of taking that legislation through the House. That disadvantage of not being able to steer that legislation through the House was immediately overtaken by the great pleasure that I had in hearing the submissions. And I pay tribute to Ruth Dyson and all members of the committee for having taken up that challenge with this particular piece of legislation and doing so in such a respectful way. The feedback that I've had from people on both sides of the debate, that they felt honoured and respected on both sides of the debate by the committee. So I do thank them for that, and thank Ruth Dyson for her great leadership in that regard. At the time, as I said, there were lots of the arguments that have been heard today were heard then, but I have to say that the noise was much louder then. I have to say that the noise has dampened down, and I don't feel that there is the strength of the objections that existed back then, and I think there's a very simple reason for that. A lot of the dire predictions that were made at that time simply didn't come to pass, as they hadn't in 1993, as they didn't in the year, what was it, BC or whatever, when Trevor Mallard was debating the previous one. But the point, and the point is that I went back and I looked at my first reading speech for the civil union legislation, and I actually found a speech that I could have given tonight. because I said that the Marriage Act was discriminatory back then. Every single thing I said in my speech was actually not in support of civil union. It was support in an amendment to the Marriage Act. And I wish that we had been able to go there then, but we couldn't. And I'm really proud of my friend Louisa Wall for bringing it to the House tonight. I quoted Baroness Hale, who had recently made a decision in the UK. She said the guarantee of equal treatment is essential to democracy. And it is. This isn't the slippery slope, and I actually went online before to find out what is the alternative, what's the opposite of a slippery slope, and I found that it was a leap of faith. And that's what we're doing here tonight, as we have all the way along this journey. And it's not a slippery slope, it's about understanding where our democracy must stand. It must stand for human rights. I said in my third reading speech that I had a lot of luck on my side when I chose the circumstances of my birth. I was born to the majority status in every single respect. I was white, I was female, and I was heterosexual. And I was born into what was called then the one true faith. I was born into the Catholic Church. And I said that what concerned me at the time was that some representatives of that church had essentially asked me to set aside one of the principles it stands for and one of the values it taught me, and that was the one that affirms committed, faithful, loving relationships between two people who wish to share their lives together. Mr. Speaker, I stand by those values, and that's why I stood by the civil union legislation. That's why I stand by this marriage amendment tonight, and that's why I believe that the people who want to, who have opposed this bill, actually speak to those values in exactly the same way that we did back then. And I hope that this House can see its way clear to seeing the passage of this legislation, and for today and the rest of the passage of this bill to go down in history as a day that we stood proudly for human rights.
The Honourable Tau Henare.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for recognising